Greetings, everybody. I'm Father Dave, and this is part 2 of a teaching entitled The God of Wonders. And this part is entitled Wonders in a Time of Shaking. The psalmist in Psalm 77, verse 14 says, "You are the God of wonders. You have made known your might among the peoples." In our last talk, we saw how God's purpose is to speak to his church through the shaking, to draw us back to him, to purify and build us up, to encourage us to engage in the mission he's given us through Jesus Christ. The mission of reaching out to our community in word and deed with the saving and healing love of Christ. And he desires to fill his present house, which is us, the people of God, with his glory. The writer to the Hebrews, in speaking about God shaking the world, refers back to the time when God appeared on Mount Sinai to speak to Moses and the children of Israel, who were the Exodus generation. At Mount Sinai, God's voice literally shook the mountain, a terrifying experience for everyone. And Moses said, "I tremble with fear." This was not only because of the experience of God's presence, but according to Deuteronomy 9, verse 19, he feared that God might destroy the people after they had made the idol of the golden calf. However, Hebrews points out we are in a covenant far superior to the Old Testament. We are in a relationship with God through Jesus Christ, which opens up the heavenly realm right where we are. This means we can worship at one with the heavenly host, surrounding the very throne of God with reverence and awe. When God speaks, we are reminded of who he is, the Holy Lord, who is our Creator and to whom we are accountable, not some benign old man in the sky who will indulge our waywardness. God speaks so that we may return to him and to those things that are real and lasting, that cannot be shaken, not the fleeting idols of our materialistic and narcissistic culture with its ultimately shallow pursuits. Plagues bring death closer. We have seen the images from China and Italy of thousands of coffins and funerary urns, people dying in such numbers that the funeral homes and mortuaries can hardly deal with the situation. Several countries are quite overwhelmed. In Ecuador, there are bodies in the streets. When death is so intrusive and not sanitized or hidden, we are compelled to think about life and the purpose and meaning of our lives. And now I want to share 2 examples of what can happen when people take advantage of times of shaking and how God can use us in these times. The great bubonic plague of 1665 and 1666, which decimated the population of London, spread rapidly throughout the whole country. Many people who lived in towns retreated to more isolated houses in the countryside, much like today's social distancing. These places were relatively safer. Among those were a young man of the city of Cambridge who moved out to a house called Woolsthorpe. That house is still there today. He spent a long period of time there in isolation. His name? Isaac Newton, the great scientist and a committed Christian. These enforced absences were the most fruitful time of Newton's life. He was free of the busyness of university life and lots of other restrictions, and it was there that he spent the time in discovery and development of the theory of gravity, laws of motion, optics, and theory of calculus. Theories that are the basis of all modern science. And without his discoveries, we would not have much of today's technology that we take for granted. It was there that he sat one day looking out of the window and watched an apple fall from a tree. This led to his discovery of the laws of gravity and motion. As he sat in the house, he also made observations about the light which came through a chink in the window shutter, inspiring him to develop the physics of optics and light. Isaac Newton returned to university life in Cambridge. 6 months later, he was elected as a minor fellow of Trinity College, and 2 years later, he was appointed as the second Lucasian professor. With his academic position and income secure, he continued to develop his ideas and research from Woolthorpe Manor. Newton's enormously productive time at Woolthorpe is often called the Annus Mirabilis, or the Year of Wonders. My second example concerns a great city, one with which we are quite familiar now, Wuhan in China. In front of one of the biggest and most prestigious hospitals in Wuhan, there stands the lonely statue of a man named Eustachius Zanoli, the founder of the predecessor of what is now known as Wuhan Central Hospital. However, the story of Eustachius Zanoli and Wuhan Central Hospital is part of a much bigger story, the great missionary age of China. After the Opium Wars, as Imperial China was forced to open up to the West, missionaries, both Protestant and Catholic, who saw the opening up as a golden opportunity to come to China and preach the gospel. Bishop Zanoli was one of them. He had given his life as a young man into the service of Christ and entered the Franciscan order. In 1856, he was sent out to Hubei, and 5 years later, he became the Vicar Apostolic for the Vicariate of Hubei. Christians in Hubei province had been subject to persecution, instigated largely by the Chinese secret societies, so life was challenging for a Christian leader. Adjacent to the first cathedral church, Zanoli built the first Catholic hospital in Wuhan in 1880. Protestant mission hospitals were also built as missionaries were moved to provide proper medical care, especially for the poor who were neglected. By the end of the 19th century, there were over 100 missionary-run hospitals treating millions of patients. Western missionaries also established the first medical schools and universities in China. That specialized medical squad that was sent into Wuhan by the Chinese government to tackle the COVID-19 epidemic owed their expertise to the medical schools that had been founded by these missionaries. So, we have come full circle. Wuhan was probably indirectly saved, an even greater disaster, by that one Catholic missionary who obeyed the gospel and went to China 160 years ago. We have seen two examples of how God can use us. One man giving his life in mission outreach to others in circumstances that are challenging, and another forced into lockdown by a plague. He took advantage of the time to be inspired and use his brilliant mind to solve complex theoretical issues. Who knows what breakthroughs in medicine or science may occur when people offer themselves in times like this. May the Lord bless us all at this time and make us fruitful for the kingdom.